Hello peeps, it's Night Dagger. I am back with another video for my How the Heck Do I series. There have been some pretty major changes to one of the mods that I covered early on in this series, so I wanted to come back through and do kind of a 101A class for Industrialcraft. Yep, there have been some changes to Industrialcraft, and there have been some recent changes that should make some people happy. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to break this down into several things. First of all, we are going to cover some of the changes to familiar machines. We're going to cover the changes to the recipes for those machines. We're going to cover the fourth tier of power storage. Then we're going to go through and we're going to cover some of the new mechanics that have been added for ore processing. We're going to cover the new matter fabrication system, and then we're going to cover the new reactor mechanics. So we have a lot to do. First of all, let's come over here and let's explore the power storage. You'll notice that there are 4 machines here now. That's right, there is a fourth tier of power storage. The CESU has taken over where the MFE used to be. The CESU outputs 128 EU per tick. The bat box is still the same. 128 EU per tick holds 300,000. The MFE now outputs 512 EU per tick and holds 4 million. The MFSU now puts out 2048 per tick and holds 40 million. So, huge amount of power there. With that, there are new transformers. There's an EV transformer now, which converts between 2048 and 8192. Also, the transformers now have a GUI. Redstone equals step up, fixed step down, fixed step up. What does this mean? Well, this means that if you know that you never want to have a transformer up convert, like if we never want this transformer to take in 128 and put out, or take in 32 and put out 128, you can click fixed step down, and it will only ever step the voltage down from 128 to 32. It will never up convert. Same thing with this. If with this in, it will only up convert. It will never down convert. This lets you put a lever on it and toggle it between one or the other. If you turn the lever on, it steps up. If you turn the lever off, it steps down. So, new transformers to handle the new voltages. Now, there has been a very controversial change to the Energynet. Let's take a bat box here, okay? Let's put the bat box down. Let's get ourselves some glass fiber cable, which now has a throughput of 8,192 EU per tick. A lot of the cables took a step up. So your tin cable is now 32, your copper is 128, your gold is still 512, your HV cable is 2048, but your glass fiber is 8,192. Let's go ahead and put this on here, just like that. Let's get ourselves a couple geothermal generators and some lava cells. Let's put a couple geothermal generators down. Let's put some lava cells in this one and some lava cells in this one. I bet you were waiting for the boom, weren't you? Well, there's no boom. The change that I was referring to was that the Energynet changed so that it reads total line voltage instead of packets. So if you had 2 geothermals on here, they output a total of 40. That would make this line voltage 40. This can only take 32. Boom, right? Well, it seems like they've reverted that change for now. So, if you're using the latest version of Industrialcraft, that will work. You can still do the serial storage, just like this. You can still have all of your wonderful electric furnaces connected to a line with a whole bunch of bat boxes. They're not going to blow up if you're using the most recent version. Now, I do not know how long this is going to last. So, take this with a grain of salt. Make sure you test in a test world if you change your version of Industrialcraft to make sure you know how the Energynet is going to behave. Because in previous versions of IC2 Experimental, all of this would have blown up in my face. Along with this is that machines can now once again take in from multiple power sources. No, I want to discharge the battery. So you can once again have a furnace supplied from 3 sides, and it's not going to blow up. It's not going to work any more efficiently, but if we give it some overclockers, and that is another thing that we should probably cover. Let's put a couple of overclockers in this thing, and notice that the overclockers now tell you exactly what they do. A lot of the Industrialcraft machines have been changed to do this. Like the electric furnace tells you it takes 3 EU per tick to run, 32 EU per tick max. Geothermal outputs 20 EU. This can take 32, has a capacity of 40K. Overclocker upgrade, if you have a stack of 1, tells you it decreases the process time to 70% and it increases the power to 160%. Stack it to 2, well, now 49% and 256. At 4%, it's 24% of the time, but 600% of the power. 32, well, yeah, that's ridiculous. But yeah, you can stack huge amounts of overclockers in here now, and it's going to drastically increase the power requirement, but it's going to drastically decrease the processor time, and this will tell you by exactly how much now, which is really, really nice. So, let's cover some of the recipe changes. One of the biggest changes is that refined iron no longer exists. Refined iron, if you take a look, the recipe for refined iron is still there, but if you have refined iron, it's pretty much exactly the same as just iron. If we take a look at the recipe for the electric furnace, it now requires, well, this requires an electronic circuit, but with the electronic circuit, requires copper cables, redstone, and an iron plate. No longer takes refined iron. You'll find that this is the case for most things. The basic machine casing, which is the machine block, now takes 8 refined iron plates. The advanced machine casing, still kind of the same. But refined iron is no longer necessary for any of this stuff. Let's go ahead and get ourselves a piece of iron. Throw it in here just to show you it still works. That's going to get us our refined iron. We'll take that out. Just walk around with it for a minute. I don't know if it's going to do it or not, but I noticed a behavior in one of the mod packs I was playing with that kind of interested me. Yeah, it might be a Greg Tech thing. I don't know. Anyway, refined iron is now pretty much totally useless. I think you can still use it to make a lot of the stuff for iron, but it's pretty much only there for backwards compatibility. In case you had a bunch of iron in your world, they didn't want all of your iron go away if you had refined iron when you upgrade, so refined iron still exists, but it's pretty worthless. Now, as far as creating power storage, let's take a look at the recipe for the bat box. Pretty much the same. However, it requires tin item casings now and tin cable to make a battery. An item casing, take a hammer, smash a plate. How do you get a plate? Take an ingot, smash it with a hammer. How do you get the hammer? A bunch of iron, some sticks. 80 uses. So this is a consumable tool that you have to use to fashion your metal into plates in order to be able to actually do anything with it for Industrialcraft. Recipe for the CESU requires advanced rechargeable batteries and bronze plates. We take a look at this, requires sulfur dust and lead dust. That's right, there are new types of dusts that are added to Industrialcraft that allow you to make better batteries. Lead dust is actually just gathered from lead ore. We'll get to that thermal centrifuge thing in a little bit. But lead dust is basically just gained from lead ore. let's see, the MFE. Well, this is a familiar recipe. It's basic machine casing, some insulated gold cable, and some energy crystals. But the energy crystal now requires energium dust to be compressed. Energium dust is gained from 5 redstone and 4 diamond dust, which means MFEs now require 16 diamonds instead of 4 to build them. That's a pretty major change. We take a look at the MFSU. Well, that's a familiar recipe. Lapotron crystals, that really hasn't changed except for requiring lapis lazuli dust. However, bear in mind that Lapotron crystals require energy crystals, so each Lapotron crystal is now worth 4 diamonds too. So this thing now requires 16 diamonds for that, and 4 diamonds for each one of these, so MFSUs are now ridiculously expensive. But they hold so much more. The transformer recipes, well, these require coils now. Coils are made from uninsulated copper wire around an iron ingot. The MV transformer, that one remained the same. HV transformer, that now requires one of those advanced rechargeable batteries. But other than that, it pretty much remained the same. The EV transformer takes a Lapotron crystal. So, again, this is pretty expensive. Now, we've covered some of the basic changes to some of the familiar machines. Let's go ahead and cover some of the new machines that have been added to the ore processing cycle. We're going to start with this machine here. This is an ore washing plant. Well, what does it do? Exactly what it says on the tin. It washes ore for you. Now this is an MFE, isn't it? Yep. So, we're going to get ourselves a macerator. And we're going to get ourselves 3 transformer upgrades. And, you know, I'm kind of curious because I saw something in the patch notes that I want to test. I want to bring this macerator, I think, over here. I want to run a power cable all the way out here. I actually have not tested this yet, so you guys get to see this while I'm doing it. What happens if we connect a macerator directly to... Oh, yep, see? It's not supposed to do this, guys. This is supposed to blow up, but until... The patch notes that I saw said until they get to a point where they can simulate the line voltages accurately, they've turned off explosions for machines. So, for right now, if you're using this version of Industrialcraft, you can hook anything up to direct extreme voltage and it'll work. That will not continue to be the case, so I strongly urge you to still follow good protocols in setting up your Industrialcraft facilities so that this does not happen to you. But you can connect it directly on for the moment. Let's go ahead and put the transformer upgrades in here so that if I upgrade this world, I don't know why I would, but if I do, it's not going to blow up in my face. Let's get ourselves some iron ore. Let's go ahead and put the iron ore in the macerator. We'll start macerating it. We'll go ahead and speed it up a little bit. We get crushed iron ore. We don't get iron dust anymore. Well, what does crushed iron ore do? Well, you can smelt it into iron bars. So you still get double your ore input from macerating. However, you'll see that there is a step here called the ore washing plant. Well, what happens if we put the crushed iron ore in the ore washing plant? Well, it's going to start washing it. This step takes a little while, but you can speed it up by putting overclockers in like everything else. That gets us purified crushed iron ore, tiny piles of iron dust, and stone dust. Well, tiny piles of iron dust, 9 of those equals some iron ore. So this actually more than doubles your iron ore now. The stone dust is used to make your CF powder. So, construction foam. Now, we could take this purified crushed iron ore and we could smelt it and get ourselves a bar of iron. Or we can come to this new machine here and we can throw it in the thermal centrifuge, which is going to start heating up. And again, this takes a while. You know what? I think we're going to come back to this. Yeah. Let's come over here while that cooks up, because that step does take a while. And let's address this monstrosity over here. This thing that I have set up over here, ignore those, we'll get to those in a little bit, is basically an MFSU that's fully powered up with a bunch of MFEs on it. This here is the new mass fabricator. It functions pretty much the same way as the old one did, however, with one major change. Let's give ourselves some scrap. And you can use either scrap or you can use scrap boxes now. Scrap boxes last 9 times as long in the mass fabricator. Let's give this thing some power. The mass fabricator is going to immediately start burning up our scrap boxes, and it's going to start progressing. You may have noticed when I paged over this that we have UU matter 0 millibuckets. That's right, UU matter no longer exists in the usual form. It is now a liquid that you pour into cells to get UU matter cells. When this completes the progress, you'll get 1 bucket of UU matter. Throw a cell in there, you get the UU matter out. It's treated like any other forged liquid in that you can pump it out and store it in tanks if you want. You can pump it around, you can pump it into other machines. It works perfectly fine. Let's give ourselves, let's just give ourselves some UU matter cells to simulate this having run for a while. Now, what do you do with UU matter cells? Well, you can't craft them like you used to. Nope, you have to come over here to the scanner. The scanner allows you to drop an item in here and scan its molecular structure and then store it in this crystal memory. Crystal memory is made of silicon dioxide and obsidian dust. Silicon dioxide is clay dust thermally centrifuged. And I'm not really sure how to get to this crystal memory here. Haven't quite figured that out yet. I'm not sure if this will work. So let's go ahead and try dropping that in there. Nope, doesn't work. So I would imagine it's probably thermally centrifuged to get this, but I'll post it in the comments or the description when I figure out exactly how this goes, because I don't have the right NEI plugin. Anyway, the way this works is that you take an item, say a piece of cobblestone, you drop it in the scanner. And it's going to scan it, pulling 512 EU per tick to do this, mind you. And it's going to tick this up 1% every time this thing completes. And when it gets done, it's going to give you the scan result here. If you scan something that can't be duplicated, it's going to give you an error. You take it out, you start over, you just wasted all that power. If it gives you something that will work, it's going to give you a scan result here that you can then import into this crystal memory. You might see here that I have an item, diamond. I scanned a diamond earlier. It tells me I need 10,121 millibuckets of UU matter and 560,000 EU in order to make diamond. Well, once you get the crystal memory, you come over to this thing here. This is your pattern storage. And in the pattern storage, you put the crystal in there, and then you click this to import from the crystal. And that will store the crystal's information in the pattern storage. After you've done that, you come over here to the replicator, and you can use this to select the patterns that are in the nearby pattern storage. Feed this thing some UU matter by dropping cells in or pumping it in, and you can tell this to run once or run repeatedly, or to stop. Let's go ahead and tell it to run once on our diamond. It's going to start pulling in the EU that it needs. It's going to start importing the UU matter that it needs. And once both of these reach 100%, it will duplicate us a perfect diamond right there. We'll come back to this. The thermal centrifuge over here is done running, we got iron dust and a tiny pile of gold dust, which is awesome. You can now get gold from your iron if you thermally centrifuge it. Now, another thing I haven't tried, but I imagine it probably works, is if we take a block of redstone and put it underneath this, it's going to keep it turned on, just like your induction furnace. So if you want to keep this thing heated up so you don't have to wait for the heating step every time, you can throw a piece of redstone under there, or a redstone torch, or a lever, or whatever, and that will keep this thing passively heated. However, it is going to pull energy while it's doing that, so make sure you've got the power to supply it. Alright, how are we doing over here? 15% on the UU matter. It's pulling the UU matter relatively slowly. It's got all of the power it needs to make the conversion. It just needs to pull the UU matter. Let's go ahead and cover the next thing while we're waiting on this. We've got this iron here, or well, we've got our iron dust. Let's go ahead and get ourselves an iron bar. Now, the idea of using a hammer to make all of your iron plates seems kind of stupid, right? Why would you use something that burns iron and is consumable when you have a machine that can do it for you? This here is your metal former. It has 3 different modes: extruding, rolling, and cutting. Rolling takes ingots and turns them into plates. Let's go ahead and overclock this a little bit so we're not waiting so long. So that gets us our iron plate. Extruding takes your iron ingot and turns it into cable. So it's a more efficient way to make cable, as opposed to using the wire cutters, which is how you have to make your plates to begin with. Yes, there are wire cutters too. They use iron plates, iron ingots, and they have 60 uses, and you have to cut plates into wire. So to get your initial copper wire, you have to make a plate using the hammer, and then you have to cut it with the cutter, and you only get 2 cables out of it. Well, that same copper ingot in extruding mode gets you 3. So this saves you durability on tools, and it gets you more efficient output in exchange for burning power. We also have cutting mode, which takes your iron plates and cuts them into cables. So in case you have some iron plates laying around that you didn't use and you want to cut them into cables but you don't want to use a wire cutter, you can use cutting mode to do that. Again, there's recipes all over the place, and you can take tin casings, cut them into tin cans, or extrude them into tin cans rather. Extrude tin plates, you get empty cells. Extrude tin ingots, you get tin cables. Iron casings get you iron fences, more cables. Iron plates get you fuel rods, which is something else we're going to have to cover. Cutting mode, cutting an iron item casing gets you industrial credits. Again, these are still pretty useless, so I don't know why you would. Rolling mode, roll plates, you get casings. Roll ingots, you get plates. Pretty standard stuff. Now, let's go ahead and cover the changes to nuclear science. If we take a look at the different fuel rods, you'll notice, oh, holy crap, we have new fuel rods. We still have the standard uranium fuel rods, but now we also have these, well, the lithium and tritium fuel rods I don't believe do anything yet. But we also have these new ones called MOX. What's MOX? Well, it's an alloyed fuel. In order to make a fuel rod now, you have to have enriched uranium nuclear fuel, which you put into a canning machine with a fuel rod to get your fuel rod. This is a different canning machine. I don't know exactly what the difference is. Other than the fact that the GUI looks really weird. To get your enriched uranium nuclear fuel, you have to combine 6 pieces of uranium-238 with 3 tiny piles of uranium-235. to get your uranium-238, you have to thermally centrifuge purified crushed uranium ore. That's also how you get your uranium-235. So, you thermally centrifuge purified crushed uranium ore, or just crushed uranium ore if you don't want to get the maximum output, and you get uranium-238 and uranium-235. Let's see here. Let's get ourselves some purified crushed uranium ore. Throw that in there. And we'll wait for it to thermally centrifuge. While we're doing that, we're going to take off our protective gear. Okay? And this is going to get us our uranium-235 and our uranium-238. Let's overclock this to speed it up. Notice I just picked up a radiation effect. I am carrying enriched uranium fuel sources in my bare hands. This is not good. You have to wear full hazmat gear in order to carry around uranium fuel anymore. If you don't, you actually start taking damage pretty fast. We're going to put it back into creative so we don't have to deal with that. Once you get all of that, you get your enriched uranium fuel, you put it in the canner, and you get a fuel rod. The core mechanics for nuclear reactors have remained roughly the same. However, breeder reactors really no longer exist. I think you can still re-enrich uranium by putting a depleted cell next to uranium, but you can also thermally centrifuge your depleted uranium cells, which you now are guaranteed to get a depleted cell for each regular cell that you put in. So, uranium fuel rod runs a full cycle, you'll get depleted uranium. What do you use that for? Well, you run it in the thermal centrifuge and you get 4 uranium-238 back, so you get most of the uranium-238 that you put into it back, but you also get this tiny pile of plutonium, and you get some iron dust. Well, plutonium, what's that used for? Well, 9 pieces of that makes plutonium, and if you take uranium-238 and plutonium, you get MOX nuclear fuel. If you can that, you get a MOX fuel cell. Well, what's that do? In a reactor, MOX has pretty much the same properties as uranium. It outputs the same amount of heat, it outputs the same amount of power, and it only lasts half as long. Well, you might say, well, what's the point of that then? It only lasts half as long? Why would I use it? Why wouldn't I just use uranium? Well, MOX actually has a variable output. At 0 heat in a reactor, let's go into my little nuclear bay here. At 0 heat in a reactor, MOX will put out exactly the same amount of EU. I've got MOX fuel rods in here, and I've got uranium fuel rods in here. If we turn these on, we'll take a look here that we're getting 60 EU per tick out of this. We're getting 60 EU per tick out of this. This is a perfectly heat neutral system, right? Let's take a look at this one. This reactor has been heated up to very, very close to explosion. The same fuel rods are now outputting 293 EU per tick. Almost 5 times the amount of power coming out of this. Why? MOX gets more efficient as the heat goes up. As you get closer and closer to the breaking point, it gets more and more powerful. So you get more power out of it if you run the reactors hot. Now, it is not a simple factor of heat. Like, yes, I've got it very, very close to the edge here. The exact temperature doesn't matter. What matters is the difference between the exploding temperature and the current temperature. So, all of these heat capacity reactor platings, these are just here to make it a little bit safer to get that hot. it isn't really required to have these. If you really want to run on the edge, you can run without these, but you better be keeping a really close eye on this heat meter, because you've got a lot less margin for error with lower heat capacity reactors. Once a MOX fuel rod depletes, you'll get depleted MOX fuel rods, same as uranium. What are they used for? Well, if you centrifuge those, you get a tiny pile of plutonium, and you get 3 plutonium back. You get all of the plutonium that you put into it back, as well as a little bit of extra. Plus you get your iron dust back, which is always cool. So, you actually get more plutonium out of the depleted rod than you do out of the regular rod. Now you have to replace the uranium-238, but what this means is that you are eventually going to end up with large amounts of plutonium that you can't really do a whole lot with, right? I mean, you're only ever going to build so many nuclear reactors. We'll come back over to these things. These things here are radioisotope thermoelectric generators. We'll put one of these down, and we take a look at it, and it's got a GUI, and it has a buffer. Well, if we take a look at this, power output, 1 to 16 EU per tick max. This actually runs on radioactive waste. Most notably, pellets of RTG fuel, which is dense iron plates, which is just 9 iron plates compressed, and 3 plutonium. So once you've got your 3 plutonium, you can make pellets of RTG fuel. Let's give ourselves a few of these. If we put 1 RTG fuel in here, it's going to output 1 EU per tick. Put 2 in here, now it's going to output twice as much, 2 EU per tick. Put a third one in, now we're getting 4. Now we're getting 8. Put a fifth one in, now we're getting 16 EU per tick, and notice that these things do not have a damage bar. That's right, these things never run out. So this is a way to produce passive power generation that will never expire and will never blow up. It requires tons and tons of plutonium to do it, which means you basically have to run nuclear reactors in order to be able to produce the waste products that allow you to produce this. But get a couple of these things running, and you've got some passive power generation that can actually get pretty impressive. Now, what I've done here is total overkill. The amount of plutonium required to make all of these pellets of RTG fuel is just ridiculous. But, you know, in an established world, this is possible. And this actually outputs so much power that I had to have an MFSU on here to hold it. An MFE can't deal with it. So, uranium gives you 60. MOX can potentially give you more, and acts pretty much the same way as uranium unless you ramp up the heat. Let's come back over here to our mass fabricator. Notice we have 2,000 millibuckets of UU matter in there now. Come over here, and we've got a scan result. It requires 4 millibuckets of UU matter and 128 EU in order to make cobblestone. We can save that to our crystal memory. We can come over here to our pattern storage, drop our pattern in there, and import it from the crystal. We now have 2 patterns in here. And we can take a look and see exactly how much is required for each. We take a look in here, hey look, we've got a diamond. Let's go ahead and make ourselves a piece of cobblestone. Almost too fast to see, because it requires so little to do. We can repeat run this and produce ourselves tons of cobblestone. Now, I don't know why you would do this, because UU matter is pretty expensive stuff to create, but yeah, you got yourself a cobblestone generator here, and we can tell it to stop whenever we want. So, this has been most of the major changes to Industrialcraft. Now, this is Industrialcraft experimental, which means, you know what, I totally forgot to tell you guys how to get sulfur, didn't I? Getting sulfur is actually pretty easy. you just extract gunpowder to get sulfur. So go kill some creepers, extract their gunpowder, you got the sulfur that you need to make the batteries for this thing. Sorry guys. Anyway, I believe that covers most of the major changes from Industrialcraft to 1.5.2 to Industrialcraft Experimental in 1.6.4. Now, some of the changes that I have mentioned here may not be valid throughout some of the later versions of Industrialcraft. For example, being able to hook a machine up to any source of power, that's certainly going to change at some point. I do not recommend hooking your machines straight up to MFSUs without putting the proper transformers in them, because one of these days you're going to update Industrialcraft, you're going to load your world, and everything's going to blow. So definitely practice good transformer safety. However, we now know how to make stuff using UU matter. We now know how to handle the new nuclear reactors, or the new nuclear reactor fuel MOX. We now know how to passively generate power from nuclear byproducts. We know how to get even more efficiency out of our ores. And we know how to go about producing the new power storage. So, I think I've covered everything major. If you guys liked the video or if you found it helpful, please let me know in the comments. I always appreciate feedback on the videos. If you like it, make sure you hit subscribe and favorite. And I will be back sometime in the near future, might even be as early as tonight, with a major project. That's right, now that I've covered the changes to Industrialcraft, it's time to cover Industrialcraft's big brother. Sometime within the next day or two, we're going to do Greg Tech. Catch you later, peeps.